Hello and welcome to this episode of FireDEV, a fireside chat with people in the industry. Today my guest is Adam Zelenay. How are you doing, Adam?
I'm very good. How are you, Frahan?
I'm good. I'm good. I appreciate you jumping on, the podcast today. And so you used to work at Zeptolab, is that correct?
That's correct. Almost
Yes,
5 years.
5 years. Good stuff. So you was it like a live ops manager, product manager? Is that what you was there?
Yeah, I was a live ops manager. Part of that is also a little bit of product management work. So, every company has a different title for various positions. So, yeah, my focus was basically on managing games that were already live.
Okay, so like, what does that specifically, entail? Because live ops manager, I feel like the average person, if they see that title, they might not exactly know, what you're doing on a day to day basis. They'll have an idea if they see, games programmer or game artist or animator or sound design. They've got more of an idea of what that is. But live ops manager, it seems a bit like not too sure what that even is.
Yeah, that's actually a great question, and you're not the first to ask. So, the way I would describe it is a live ops manager is a product manager who specializes in games that have already been released. So, games as they're developed, they go through various cycles, right? So you go first through your pre-production, you're doing a little bit of market research, you're writing down your hypotheses, deciding whether this concept that you have might be worth developing, right? Then you enter your production phase when you actually start building the game, and then eventually you're gonna the big day is gonna come and you're gonna global release your game. That's when the floodgates are open and you start gaining a lot of a huge number of players, right? And we can consider that after this point, after your global launch, the game is live, and at that point you need a little bit different set of skills that you have needed up until that point, right? Why is that? Because after you've released your game, you'll be collecting a huge amount of data. At the same time, a lot of players will already, hopefully, will already be engaged with your game. So you need to be really careful because you can make, bad decisions can make a lot of people angry and can potentially cause a lot of damage. So I don't think this is particular to the video games industry, mobile games to be specific. I think this can also be applicable to any product, right? Any application. Once you're live, you need to kind of shift your mindset a little bit as a PM. And I think a lot of PMs already do that, right?
Okay, and so you're saying your sort of job comes into play once the game is live. Is there any sort of interaction that you're having whilst the game hasn't launched yet? It's being developed. Is there any sort of things that are getting ready? Like being set up for you, for example. So whether it's information, whether it's assets, or whatever it is. Is there something that is still done? Pre-launch that's getting you in place, or is it literally game launch now? Now we put you on the project.
Oh, well, I'm laughing a little bit because this is the $1 million question. Because in an ideal world, yes, a live ops manager should be involved while the game is being developed to already suggest a certain functionalities and features that should be in the game after it's released, particularly because there is this kind of mantra that holds true in live operations that things just tend to go wrong, right? A lot of this is why is this? Because in live ops, a lot of the times you're messing with the code, right? I mean, maybe you're just changing timers or setting different prices, but essentially, unless you have really robust tools, and very few companies actually have them, you're tampering with the code, and this is very dangerous, right? So things can go wrong, and things can go even wrong, like you can just have regular bugs, right? You can have a critical bug or a nasty bug that, in an ideal world, you would think of before you get to the global launch, and the game will have functionality that would allow the PM, or the live ops manager, to fix it without having to push an update. So yes, the live ops manager should be involved already in the production of the game before the global launch. It's strongly recommended, and if he's not, I mean, it can take its toll later down the line. Maybe you're gonna have to push features out that could have been implemented long time ago during the before the global launch, and it could save you a lot of time and pain.
Okay. And like being a live ops, manager, like wh- how is that compared to, an artist or a technical role? And do you need any of those expertise? Like, does it help that you have, if you have some technical expertise? Like, what's the situation? Like, how would you go about becoming a live ops manager? What's that sort of path?
Right. Well, first and foremost, I think as a the best way to think about a live ops manager is just consider him as a PM, right? And any PM, it will benefit from having knowledge from all the other areas of the game, right? Whether that be technical, artistic, etc., etc. So I think that not only would it be beneficial, but it's actually necessary, right? I mean, if you need to talk to your artists or to your engineers, you need to kind of, have the common understanding, and you know as a PM, you need to wear various hats, and sometimes part of that means, changing your vocabulary a little bit, or just making sure you're getting the message across, right? So the answer to that question is a very definite yes, and it's just the same as for any other PM, right? You need to wear many hats, and the the way I like to describe it, and I think I used this definition some time ago, is that the PM was like the druid in World of Warcraft, right? You need to be able to shift into one role or another depending on what the party needs, the party being your project, your team, right? So yeah, and usually, I mean, that's gonna come with experience and a little bit of self-study as well. Now, of course, one caveat is that if you really specialize in live operations, um, I have a feeling, or my experience shows, that there tends to be a little bit more. I'm not sure if the right word would be urgency or stress, because, like I said, mistakes happen in live products, and you need sometimes to be able to make decisions quickly because there is fires, right? So that would be one distinction I would point out for a live ops manager.
Okay, and as a live ops manager, because you're dealing with a live, project over, like, let's say the 5 years that you was working at Zeptolabs, was there ever a scenario that in the middle of the night you got a call and you had to jump on work on the weekend or on a holiday? Was there anything like that?
Oh yeah, many, many. I mean, it's not ideal, and actually, to be fair, this tends to happen in companies that don't have a lot of live ops experience or tools, or they're just, let's say, developing their live ops know-how. And I have also experienced that, but also within the same company, it seems that with more knowledge of live ops and even technical knowledge that we've obtained, these sort of midnight phone calls have essentially been brought down to zero. So, you can prevent this with a lot of experience. But yeah, definitely had my share of those. It's not a pleasant experience, though.
I can imagine. So, like, how does the company overcome that? Do they basically say, okay, you're working 9 to 5. After you clock off, we have like another live ops manager, either in the same country or another, time zone, but they're dealing with the hours where you might not be available.
Okay, so well, first and foremost, usually you have support agents, right? So they're constantly tracking, Discord or chat rooms
Hmm.
or or even their dashboards if there is something spiking, maybe some crash rate or anything
Or
like
social
that.
media, I guess, even as well.
Yeah,
Somebody
absolutely,
saying on
absolutely.
Twitter that your game's breaking, for example.
Exactly. So I mean, and I'm talking about the ideal scenario. Not every company can afford that. I mean, in startups or even smaller studios, yeah, it's usually the PM's responsibility of uh, tracking the overall health of the game, right? In bigger companies that can afford to have support agents, usually they have somebody working at any point in time, right? If you have a big game, then you need to make sure that the game is working and nothing's breaking, right? Um, but then there comes the question of, if something does happen, who fixes it? And to make this situation even a little bit more difficult is who fixes it when it's, let's say, the 24th of December, right? Because what happens on the 24th of December? Everybody's on vacations, but that's also when a lot of games have a lot of special events going on, so there are maybe the
Spiking downloads as well. If there's
exactly,
a big
exactly.
event.
So things can have a tendency to go really, I mean, I don't want to be negative, but those are like the prime time, so things can go wrong during that time. So the question is, who fixes it? So in the past, how we would approach this issue is that we would assign various team members to what we would call the night watch, which is obviously a term from Game of Thrones, right? And what that would mean is that that person should be available in one form or another, whether that be phone or an email even. And in case something really bad happened, but it would have to be something really critical, that person who has the night watch should have his laptop ready and should be able to fix the critical things. But again, if we're talking about sensitive topics such as the 24th of December or maybe the 1st of January, um, those issues would have to be super super critical, because of course at any point you want to respect people's private times, vacations, and a lot of forethought and planning went into determining who would have their night watch when. So usually there was a lot of collaboration and discussion months in advance, and just to make sure that people were not planning any vacations or that they didn't have any important let's say family responsibilities during those times. So usually the people who did have their night watch were aware of it and they were completely fine with it. And you know, to be a little bit optimistic, because I'm talking about a lot of negative stuff, but a lot of the times it was just that the person was on call, had their laptop ready, but nothing happened. So
Yeah. Okay. And in that sort of scenario, when somebody is on night watch, because different people, will interact with the team differently in terms of speed. What I mean by that is some people will prefer email, some will prefer calls, some will prefer like Slack or Teams. Like there'll be different ways of getting hold of a person faster depending on who it is. Do they set their priority saying, email me, that's the best, that's the quickest way, or message me on Teams or Slack or whatever you're using, that's the quickest way, or is it you have to have this standard, or like what's the situation?
yeah, I think again this is completely collaborative. So like I mentioned, this was something that we would plan months in advance, and usually the person would say his preferred way of reaching him. But of course we would always, or practically, your phone would be the easiest and most practical way of reaching someone. But there could be a situation, and I think we did have it in the past, when the person said that he might not have a phone coverage because he was in the mountains. He said he would have the
Mm,
internet but not phone, which is a little bit strange, but that's how it was, right? But again, this is one of those sensitive topics that you want to completely have a discussion about with your team. And you're gonna have to work to strike a balance between what's the most efficient way, but also that it doesn't intrude the person's private time too much. But again, speaking from experience, I think 99% of the times we all agreed to be just on the to have our phones ready when it was the person's night watch.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
Like, one of the things that you want to prevent in those sort of scenarios is that you reach out to someone and he's completely unaware, right? And you don't want to call him at 10 p.m. saying, "Oh, the game's down, can you please set it up?" And he's just, I don't know, going for a date or something. So that's why you want to prepare the whole team, and you want to plan very carefully who has the night watch when. So if that you know bad thing happens, he's ready, and you don't surprise him, and he's prepared to basically take action. So I think that's the most important thing for these kind of scenarios. Just be
Yeah.
ready and make sure that everybody, like, the expectations are set.
Yeah, of course. The last, like you said, the last thing you want is to get a call and you're not even expecting. Like, say, you're going on a date, or you're already at, like, you're out. You don't have your laptop, with you, or you're in a place where there's no signal, or there's so many different
Yeah.
things that can happen. Or maybe you're an early sleeper, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you've gone to bed. Something like that would just be insane. But like, if let's say you're on the night watch and they try and get hold of you, and they can't get hold of you. Like, they keep trying, and they can't get hold of you. Like, has there ever been a scenario like that? And then they go to the, like, do they have like a secondary night watch person, or do they just go to the next person that's live ops? Like, how does that work? Like, if that scenario's ever occurred?
Right. I don't think this scenario has occurred, thankfully. But of course, you need to have a safety net. So at any point, the product manager is pretty much should always be reachable. And in case the person who had the night watch is not available, then, I mean, anyone really, then you go into emergency mode, right? And if it's crucial, then whoever can fix it fixes it. So for example, if let's say I see that the support agents are raising an issue, and I cannot reach the person who has the night watch, then I'm not gonna delay. If it's something I can do, then I'll totally do it. Even, to be completely honest with you, there has been situations where you just don't want to bother the person who has the night watch. Like, even though he agreed to it, is like, if it's something super minor, and let's say I, as a PM, noticed it in Slack, then I would just fix it myself. It would maybe take me 12 minutes, and I didn't have to bother the person. So if it's something that I could do, right?
Okay, that makes sense. And your time at Zeptolab, like, what games did you work on? Because Zeptolab has worked on, you know, loads of big titles. Which specific games did you work on?
Right. So the majority of my time in Zeptolab, I was involved with CATS, which stands for Crash Arena Turbo Stars. And I also worked on Overcrowded Tycoon and an Idle game. So those were the two projects that I was mostly involved with.
Okay, and like, do you play many mobile games yourself?
I do. Funny story. I joined, or let's say I entered the mobile game industry in 2016, and before that, I played very casually. I always considered myself a gamer, but not necessarily a hardcore mobile gamer. But due to certain circumstances, because maybe we'll talk about this later, but I actually have a legal background. I came across the opportunity to enter the mobile games industry, and I was more than excited about it. And since then, there has been periods in my life where I only played mobile games and I didn't touch console or PC games at all. I got completely hooked, completely. And obviously, it first started that you want to dive a little bit more into the industry. You're doing a little bit of market research, and that's just sometimes a fancy term for playing a lot of different games. Um, and then you're trying to understand the industry. You're trying to deconstruct games, and the more I fell down this rabbit hole, the more I started seeing the elegance in the design that goes into such games. So nowadays I play a lot of games just to stay on on top of what's going on, what the current trends are, and if there is something completely outstanding, then yeah, we'll play it a lot. We want to understand what's going on and what are they doing and how did they come across such brilliant ideas. So yeah, I play a lot of mobile games.
Okay, and like you touched on an interesting point. So something that I was actually about to move on to is your legal background. So I'm on your LinkedIn page. You have a bachelor's in law, you have a master's in law, and you have a master's in like international and European law.
Yeah.
So a very legal heavy background, especially from education. So what made you get into games, and how did you get into games? Because you was a legal practitioner for a little while. So like,
Right.
why that transition, and how?
Well, I mean, honestly, this is a one question that I get a lot, and it was a little bit due to life circumstances,
Hmm.
because it's true that I also have a master's in international law, and I also have. I'm from Slovakia, and basically I finished college here, and I started working, preparing for the bar exam. Right, so I was practicing and basically preparing for the bar exams. Um, Due to life circumstances, I had to. Well, it's not that I was forced to, but we decided with my then girlfriend to move to Spain, where when I started looking for jobs, there were not that many opportunities in the legal area for me because obviously I wasn't a licensed Spanish lawyer. And so what I decided to do is to start applying to various game companies for a lot of entry positions such as QA or customer support. And then and I managed to get an interview in Gameloft Madrid. And Gameloft is a fairly known studio and I managed to get an interview for a junior position, a junior game economy designer. And I guess they saw the potential in me because I got the job. And I was very, very fortunate to have very good mentors. And that's essentially how I got in. And then I spent essentially a lot of my free time studying and trying to catch up because, as you can imagine, it was quite a culture change, from wearing a suit and a tie to suddenly working with, very creative people, especially in the tech industry. And that was quite a culture shock to me. So it took a little bit time to adjust. But like I said, the more I started understanding and learning about mobile game development, the more I was into it and the more passionate I was about it. It's to me, honestly, I felt very fortunate. I felt very fortunate that I got this chance because the reality is that me and a good friend of mine, we were like you could call the gamers in our college. Everybody knew us that we like to game, right? And also a good friend of mine, we finished college together. He also started working mobile games actually before me, and he was the one who suggested to me that this is a career that I should give a try. Because he thought that it's something I would enjoy and I could potentially be good at. So actually, a big chunk of my thanks goes to him because the reality is that I never considered going into mobile games or anything tech related ever. It's not what I spend my time studying. I was not proficient in it, and I never really considered it. And so I was very fortunate to get this opportunity and dip my feet in the water and show my qualities and show that it's something that I can learn and work with. And I can still tell you that I'm still very much passionate about this industry.
Okay. I mean, did you ever think about working in the gaming industry, but in a more legal, capacity? Because gaming, like any sort of tech company, especially the bigger companies, they have law department, legal departments. They'll have lawyers or people within that field that are handling that sort of thing. So, like, did you ever consider that?
Absolutely. Actually, during my time when I was working as a lawyer, I kicked off an initiative where I said, like, to my bosses, I said that, uh, have you considered, reaching out to these small game studios or even larger ones that are in our area and providing legal advice specific to the mobile game industry?
Hmm.
And they pretty much told me, like, no, but I remember my boss telling me, but I know you're into board games and video games and you're this kind of nerdy character, Adam. Like, if you want it, feel free to reach out and this can be your own project. So I did reach out to a couple of game studios, and basically they listed me their most frequent questions, and we had this short collaboration. So yeah, you're completely right. I was already at that point trying to have one foot in the industry via this method.
Yeah, I mean it does make sense because the transition that you made from the law world to the gaming world and like a designer, project manager, that sort of stuff. It's a transition that doesn't sound as obvious or necessary on the surface of it because I speak to people where they have a lower paying job and they transition. And one of the reasons for transitioning is the money and like to have a better career. But for you already had a degree, like two masters in a industry that is doing well, in an industry that people earn good money in. So like for me, that was very interesting why you would make that transition. But that does make sense that you would have tried to use some of your legal background in those areas. So that friend of yours that you mentioned, that you two was always known as the people that were the gamers. Did you ever think about doing something with him in the gaming industry? Like, I mean, actually, first of all, was that friend doing the same course as you at uni, or was he doing something else and you just happened to be friends?
No, well, we happened to meet at uni, and we became good friends because obviously we started, playing online games together. But he also started working in this industry after finishing uni, and so I would say he was always more the bigger gamer than me, because I was always like more focused on my legal career, and like I told you before, I never considered this as a career, whereas I think he was more than open to it. Right. um yeah, but of course we talk. We will discuss various areas of the business and work, but since I've been traveling a lot and I've lived abroad for the majority of my professional life, we don't get to be together as much as we would like to. So no, we haven't, collaborated or anything like that. But we do meet at conferences, which is always a great fun. And we'll joke together, and we'll talk, have a little bit of nostalgia about uni, and and this is just such a surreal experience. If you know someone and you've studied together, and then you end up in this same industry doing something completely different than what you've been studying. It's just such a surreal experience. But this actually leads me to one more point that I wanted to mention. That being that, um, you seem to be kind of focused about me making the career change, but and I told you that a lot of people ask, how is this possible? How did you go from law to designing and working in the mobile game industry? But I know a lot of people that have done this, and not too long ago, I actually met another lawyer, right? Who is also a PM, and we had this kind of moment, like, "Oh, you as well?" Like, and but also, I also know a lot of very qualified people, such as architects, bridge engineer, you name it, that ended up working in the mobile game industry. So I'm not gonna say that it's the most common thing, but it's probably more common than what people
People
think.
think.
Yeah, yeah, and that's very
Okay.
that's very inspiring, I think.
Okay, and those people that you meet that have done the transition as well, especially from roles that there's good money in, they're doing possibly well in those industries. Can you, like, when you meet them, can you tell that they're not from a conventional gaming background, or do they kind of just blend in?
Honestly, I've never had this moment when I would say like I don't believe this guy's an architect, or I don't, this guy hasn't been studying at uni. Usually, I guess I've been fortunate, but the people I've worked with were very good and professional at what they were doing.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I mean, that makes sense, especially when, because once you've gone through uni, especially if you're in some sort of legal background or engineering background, you get a certain level of professionalism, to you, and as a result, you're gonna bring that professionalism to the next industry, the next job or project that you're on.
Hmm.
As- So, as a project manager, does your legal background help, like how, like what part of your legal background have you been able to utilize for your current roles in the gaming industry?
Right. Just a little small correction. Product manager, right? Because there's a distinction. Project manager and PM.
Sorry, yes, product manager.
No worries. No worries. There's yeah. But yeah. Well, obviously, I think in anything you study, it's probably gonna spill over to what you're actually doing, whatever that may be. Um, what I feel helps me the most currently as a PM or live ops manager, depends how you want to look at it, is the critical thinking. It's the ability to formulate various hypotheses. It's the ability that I think they try to teach you in uni, or that you obtain with practice and legal practice, is to read between the lines when you're communicating with your team, because some people are just not good communicators. And as a PM, I think that sort of tactical empathy is crucial. If you're talking to a coder and he, let's say, is having a difficulty expressing himself, I think what has helped me in my career is being able to empathize. I don't know if I pronounced it properly. Empathize with him
Yeah.
and understand where he's coming from, even though he's not able to express it. So that's one area. And like I mentioned, the overly critical thinking. When we get some sort of data, it's the ability to look at it from all the possible angles and basically make sure that we read it right, and with that we scrutinize it properly, just to make sure that we are not getting any misleading data. So those would be the two that I think are currently helping me, the two skills that I've possibly obtained in my legal practice that I'm utilizing currently.
Okay. And are you currently still in Spain? Because that's where Zeptolab job was it not?
Yeah, I'm not currently in Spain. I'm currently in my hometown of Bratislava. That's the capital of Slovakia. I did live in Spain. First, it was in Madrid in Game Loft, and then in Zeptolab, I was in Barcelona. But then this little thing came that was called COVID, and as you know, probably people were working on a remote basis. So I
A lot
decided
more than
to
usual, yes.
a lot more than usual. Exactly. Well, actually, I didn't work remotely at all till then. So during COVID, it was the first time,
Hmm.
and
How was
basically,
that transition for you then?
um, well, I think to me it came as a, let's say, pleasant change, because what actually happened to me was that since it was kind of enforced, you know, and a lot of like the everyday pressures that you have, like you go to work, then you need to go to the gym, you need to go to do the groceries, still do the cooking. A lot of those just naturally fell off. So,
Hmm.
and since I'm working with my computer anyway, and a large part of the communication was already digital, not, you're using Slack and Zoom. I, I mean, it came very natural to me, and the fact that we were all in this kind of enforced remote work, it removed a lot of overhead stress from me, to be honest. Like I felt I could focus on my job much better. So to me, it came quite naturally, actually, at that time. Yeah, but like I said, I wanted to utilize the situation, and when the situation allowed it, I moved home because I wasn't home for a long time. And since we saw that it was working, the company was very open to to me working from Bratislava on a more well, basically forever. And of course, I was also traveling to Barcelona for like key meetings or various events where where we needed some, FaceTime. But it seemed to be working really great.
Okay, that's good.
I'm not gonna say that it's a good fit for everyone. I think you do need to have also certain, personality traits and skill sets, but it definitely worked for us.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. It depends on the person. Because I remember, because I've, primarily in my career post uni, have been working, from home on various different projects. And I remember pre COVID, friends saying to me, you're so lucky, you're working from home, the ones that were going to the office 5 days a week. And I remember talking to them in COVID over, like Facebook Messenger and, seeing how things are going. And they was hating it. They was like, how do you, stay at home, or like the exact people that were saying you're so lucky to be at home all day
Yeah.
were saying, I'm losing my mind, and that was probably like a month or two into lockdown. He wasn't that much into it either, so
Yeah.
it's definitely not for everyone. I prefer it personally, but it definitely isn't for everyone because some people do like that interaction, going into the office, and
Mhm.
but some people, prefer it at home, and then there's obviously the hybrid model as well. But obviously, if you've gone to a different country, then it really has to be the remote thing. So, for about 5 years, you worked as a video game journalist. Talk a little bit about that and like what got you into it, and why did you stop doing that?
That's a good question. I even forgot about that. Well, it's something that we did with my friend in uni, actually. See, now he was the one. He was working as a. He was also writing like game reviews, and he and his friend, they had this website where they were reviewing games and making like game news. And basically, he invited me to join them, and it was not like a paid job, but we would get free games and we would get to go to various conferences, etc., etc. So it was really like a pastime activity, and I greatly enjoyed doing that, greatly. um
Okay.
and it's also, I thought reviewing games is easy, but it's not. It's like if you get a game that's really boring and it's a piece of crap, for lack of a better word, you still need to push yourself and, give it like a fair chance. Like, okay, like that's a game I would probably not play after 2 hours, but you kind of need to be fair, and and you need to give it more, spend your
You
free
gotta
time.
play it,
You
yeah.
gotta play it, exactly, and
Yeah.
then write about it. So it's not as easy as I thought it would be, but it was a great experience, and
Yeah,
I
plus
think.
you've got to, yeah, you got to write about it as well. You can't just say it's rubbish, don't play it. If your general reviews on the website are, I don't
Yeah.
know, 2 pages long, 2,000 words, whatever it is, you've got to, you've got to feel that. Like you can't just say, "Oh, it's a great game, go and buy it." Even if that's how you feel, you've got to put it down, then structure
Uh-huh.
it in a way as well.
Yeah,
So yeah.
but this is also such a good practice because sometimes, I would play a game that would be getting great reviews in, let's say, other websites or other portals, and I felt it's just utter rubbish.
Mm,
And so you really, it's a good exercise to kind of um, split the subjective view from maybe seeing it through a more objective lens. You need to be able to say like, okay, this is good. The fact that it doesn't fit me doesn't make it bad, and
mm,
this is not easy. This is a great skill to develop, honestly. But it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. It's another thing why you ask me why I stopped doing it. It is that it was too time consuming. Like,
mm.
to write a review, you need to play the game, spend a fair amount of time. Then you actually need to write it, and when you start working full time, then you don't even have time to play games you want, and you definitely don't have time to play games you don't want to play.
No, then
You know?
write a review, and then you've got to take it seriously as well. You can't be like, okay, I'll just play it, write a half-ass review because it is your friend like website. It is something serious for someone,
But
and like so yeah, you've got to take it seriously. Is the website still up and running?
yeah, yeah, it was actually very successful. They sold it,
Okay.
as far as I know. Yeah, they sold it for some money, and we were also getting like AAA games, and when you get like a AAA game, then you really need to be careful. You need to spend a fair amount of time in that game, and you want to make sure you don't miss anything, and that's a bit of responsibility as well. So if you're playing a game that you enjoy, then it's a piece of cake, and you love your job. But if you're playing a
Yeah,
game that the the whole world loves, and it's just not your genre or whatever, uh, it might be a bit challenging. But still, I mean, looking at this objectively, I think there's worse, jobs that you could be doing than playing and reviewing games, right? I mean, this is
of
still a very
course.
fun thing to do.
Yeah.
We used to have the same mantra with a colleague of mine in Game Loft, I think it was. When things were not going well, there was project hell, or some things were crashing, and we were, like struggling to meet deadlines. We would say, you know what? We're still making games. We're not doing heart surgery. There's probably a lot of worse jobs that we could be doing, just to give ourselves a little bit of boost, morale, morale boost. So,
Yeah, I mean, 100%, agree with that. So when you're reviewing these games, like how do you, and because you're saying you're getting AAA titles, you're getting games, given to you to, review, how do you like cope with the, like, let me put it a different. How do you handle, you've got a big studio, they're giving you a game, and how do you like make sure that you don't just give that studio a good review for their game because you want them to give you more games like in the future, and you want to be honest, but again you don't want to piss a studio off either. Like, how do you handle that?
yeah, I think that's just a super sensitive topic, and I think you need to be a little bit diplomatic there. Unfortunately, I think I've heard stories. It didn't happen to me personally, but I have heard stories where reviewers were being overly honest, and basically that ended any further collaboration. So it's business. So yeah, I think you need to strike
Yeah,
a
it
balance,
is.
and you need to be a little bit objective, but play a little bit, the pragmatic, let's say, business guy who thinks, for the future as well. You know.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because I've seen big studios get their games reviewed by like some of the, I'm not going to mention the the video game reviewing websites, but some of the big ones out there, and like the review they've given relative to some other game from a smaller studio or an indie developer, and I'm like it sounds a bit like,
Hmm.
yeah, and like that studio has been repeating the same game every
Hmm.
year or two, and
Hmm.
they've just been reskinning it effectively. And I'm like, how are you giving it like nines and like eights and 9.5s out of 10? But then you see that studio at launch time got, clearly spending money on banner ads and other advertisement on their website. And you're
Yeah.
like, there's something up here.
Yeah, yeah. No, I've had the same experience. Like, I would be reading reviews about a game, and let's say it would be getting an average of, let's say, six or sevens, and then there's this one website where they give it like a 9.5 or 10,
Yeah.
and I could clearly see that there was this agreement between them. And that's why, honestly, I what I prefer is like individual reviewers who even buy the game with their own money, so they're under no control or influence from from the publisher at all. I think that's the most objective review that you can get. Or you can go to Metacritic, although that seems to be, if you have like fanboys,
Yeah.
they also may have a tendency to dilute the reviews a little bit. So individual reviewers on YouTube, I think, are the best go to if you want completely objective reviews.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I feel like another great way is because obviously you got YouTube and Twitch and these sort of platforms now. Just watch some streams and just some actual gameplay videos, not like a 30-second gameplay video that's been edited,
Hmm.
just like a 20-minute gameplay video that's unedited, and ignore even the person who's playing it, their reaction. Like, you can usually get an idea just by watching some actual gameplay, if the game's buggy or not, for example, like if the game seems to play well or not, like that sort of stuff. So there's a lot that you can do to get an idea of how a game is without buying it,
Hmm.
without having to rely on the opinion of one of the big reviewers, which again might be biased for their future business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is also good, but I can tell you it probably wouldn't work for me. I probably would lose like interest or attention very quickly. I prefer personally like bite-sized reviews. Like if it's longer than 10 minutes, it's already too long for me.
Mm-hmm.
If I watch the gameplay, I would like I guess I would be irritated a little bit that it's not me playing the game. And I'm to be completely honest with you, I'm not a Twitch guy. I just don't see the appeal of watching other people play games. I know it's huge. I just never clicked with me. So, but yeah, I mean, this is definitely a good way to get a feel for the game that you're looking out for
I
sure.
100%. I mean, I totally agree. I'm not the sort of person that I watch somebody else playing for an hour. I would rather, play the game. Like, I know people that instead of playing the game, they'll just watch somebody else play. Like, I've heard friends say, like, I've asked a friend, have you played this game? And they're like, I was going to, but then I ended up watching so and so on YouTube playing it, and I don't need to, play it anymore. And I'm like, okay, you've seen the story, if it's a story driven game, but there's still a difference compared to a movie where you're experiencing it. You're playing it, for
Hmm.
example. A movie, obviously, once you've seen it, you've seen it. But
Uh-huh.
whereas a game, you are still experiencing it. Obviously, if you watched it and it looked rubbish, I understand. That's fair enough. But when they watch it and it's like some major, like I think it's one of either Uncharted or Last of Us or one of those ones, and they're like, "Yeah, I've seen it. I know what happened. I'm not fussed, about playing it anymore." And it's just like, to me, it's an insane thing. But people do it. People watch Twitch. People watch YouTube, and they'll
Yeah.
just not play, the game. I remember when I was at uni, I had a friend that would come around a lot, and we would play, some games as well. But there'll be so many times where I'll say, what do you want to play? And he would say that you play what you want to play, and I'll just watch you play. And like, I just found it so weird. That was like pre this sort of live streaming
Hmm.
era, or it was just about beginning.
Hmm.
But yeah, he would literally, like, if I wanted to play some single player game, I'll put it on, I'll be playing there, and he would be on his phone as well, so he wasn't just fixed to the screen, but he would just be watching me play. And I would kind of feel like uncomfortable, because I would say to him, do you want to go, like, do you want to go? He'd be like, no, I'm happy just watching. And it was just such a strange concept.
Yeah, totally. I mean, of course, I had the same, but especially when I was a kid, and my bigger brother, he would be playing, SNES or whatever, or whatever we had at that time. And as a kid, I loved watching him play, and it could be hours. And of course, there were moments of conflict when I wanted to take the controller and he would not give it to me, right? But yeah, I mean, I definitely had this experience. But this is such an interesting topic because I'm guessing that Twitch is not necessarily only about watching the gameplay, but it's also a social experience, right? Because you have a chat and you're talking with other people or the streamer, so you have this kind of interaction. So I think Twitch has nailed the the nail on the head with this because it's not supposed to replace the experience of playing a game. I think it's really providing a social experience that where the game is kind of involved, like you can watch it and comment it, you know, but you're essentially, or from my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, because like I said, I'm not a Twitch person, but what I see is that these people are interacting. You can support your favorite streamer, and get some maybe some feedback from here or have this interaction. So this is so interesting, and this is really a part of the modern era of socializing, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. And I totally agree. The Twitch, or I'll just say streamers in general, because it's Twitch, YouTube, or any other platform that might come out. Like the streamers out there, the ones that I see doing the best are the ones with some sort of personality, usually a bit
Hmm.
over the top, and like it is a entertainment experience beyond the game they're playing. It's the same thing as when you watch a reaction video on YouTube for a movie trailer. You're obviously not watching that video for the trailer, because you would just go ahead and watch the trailer,
Yep.
but you're partly watching it for the trailer, but you're mainly watching it for that individual's reaction, maybe their feedback, maybe just like the way they talk, like you get the ones that are always just hateful, and that's kind of like
Mhm.
their jam. They're just gonna rinse everything, even if it's amazing. But then you get the ones that are over the top and funny. So yeah, it's definitely a personality thing.
But I have to admit that I can completely understand this because I like my guilty pleasure is I'm watching this one YouTube channel, and it's a guy. He basically aggregates like all the weird stuff he finds on YouTube or TikTok, and he's basically commenting on it. And it's never any like positive stuff. It's usually just really weird stuff. And well, first he exposes me to like the really weird stuff that I don't really want to find by myself, and he just shows you like the snippets of it. But it's like you say, it's this personality, like he's like so negative, and he just looks like like he's tired of this current culture that we have, and like the weird stuff that makes it to the internet, and I'm just laughing my butt off watching this guy. So I can and I think it's exactly the same type of sentiment that people can experience when they are watching their streamers, their favorite streamers on Twitch. So yeah, that's definitely something, right? It's just this, like I say, it's this modern age of socializing.
Oh yeah, 100%. And like it goes beyond streaming and gaming in general, because a lot of people, I'll probably say most of the people listening to this podcast and this episode will probably watch some form of YouTube or some sort of content online. And like if I go and have a look at a phone review, for example, like I'll type in let's say if it's a Pixel Fold, I'll probably type in Pixel Fold review on YouTube, and there'll probably be certain YouTubers that I gravitate, towards, more, because, I like the way they talk, or I
Mhm.
like their presentation. I like how in depth they go, or sometimes they're like, the quick as well, because you get some that just, go on forever. But again, some people like that. So there's definitely an element to that. But then there's sometimes I definitely know that I've done it, and it's probably not the best thing to do. I'll open one where I actually don't like the person talking, and I'm kind of just, wanting to internally do a bit of hate.
Yep. Yep.
But again, uh, I am, interested in the review as well. So it's like I'm killing two birds with one stone. I'm getting to know about the phone or the console or whatever it is, but then I can do a bit of hate as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely an element to that, and the personalities behind these can it definitely drives it.
Yeah, it's like going beyond the enemy lines, right? It's like you're doing a little bit of spy work. Like, hey, what are this guy's arguments, right? Like,
Yeah,
why does he
I don't
want like?
agree with him. He's
Yeah, but
stupid.
I still want to hear him, right? And then
Yeah,
honestly, I think psychologists should do like a research on this topic. Like, why are we so attracted, right, to going beyond the enemy lines and interacting with someone that we just don't find sympathetic, right? I think there must be something there. Hey,
yeah. I
psychologists,
mean,
this is a good topic for your PhD.
oh yeah, for sure. I'll have to get a psychologist or a PhD, maybe someone in the games industry as a psychologist, because gaming industry, especially the bigger studios, do employ psychologists. So I'll have to get someone in and ask them what's their take on this.
Well, I know a lot of UX people have a psychology background. Sometimes it's necessary.
Oh yeah, yeah, it totally makes sense when you think about it, because knowing where like the type of colors to use, the placement of stuff, or
Mhm.
let's say the sound effects to use to really get people engaged and hooked in a way. Effectively,
Yeah.
that particular sound, and you're like, ooh, that sounds nice. I want to open the app, or I want to play a bit longer, or that visually, even though you don't sit there and think that menu looks visually appealing, I want to buy some more gems on this game with my real money. But that's basically what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if like you nailed it. anything UI related, even like the flow of screens, etc., etc. There is a lot of psychology behind it, and there is actually a particular field of psychology called behavioral. Let me type it down for you because I have a problem pronouncing it. I hope I type it right. Behavior. What do you call it?
Yeah,
Behavior.
it's a difficult one to pronounce.
There.
Behavioral. I'm struggling as well.
Okay, yeah, but basically, a lot of game designers utilize some principles from economics, and that's basically it deals with the topic of how to reduce the pain that we feel when we are paying for something. In simple terms, how to best convert people into making a purchase in our game, right? And that's a very you know I would say complex topic, because it's difficult enough to pay for something, physically, right? But you get a physical product. If you're buying shoes, maybe you might be okay. Well, these Nikes are 150 euros. That's a lot of money, but at least I'm getting a good quality product that I can hold, wear, try, etc., etc. But it's that much complex when you're dealing with a virtual product. I mean, everybody's scared that they may get scammed, right? It's gonna take money off of your card, and you get nothing, right? So there is a lot of studies and best practices that go into how to convert people into making purchases.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because you're right. When you're buying something physical, like you go into like a Nike store, for example, the T-shirt will be cheaper than like a jumper or a hoodie. The hoodie will probably be cheaper than like the jacket, for
Hmm.
example. And if there's like a big long jacket, that will probably be more expensive. And if you just sort of think about it logically, you're like, okay, there's more material, potentially more labor gone into it. It makes sense that it's more expensive.
Hmm.
But when you are dealing with something digital, where literally with a click of a button you can turn something from 10 gems into a million gems,
Hmm.
for example, or whatever it might be, it's definitely hard to persuade people that okay, they're getting value enough for them to part with their money more
Yeah,
so.
yeah, yeah. This brings to mind an article that I read in, I think it was 2016 or 17. When I started working in Gameloft, a mentor of mine forwarded me this article, and it was about a guy who spent, I think, $4,000 in one night in Hearthstone,
Jesus.
the card game. But the thing is that he was explaining why he's totally okay with making that purchase, why it had value for him, right? I mean, if you type it into Google, I'm sure it's gonna like pop up instantly, because I think it was some banker or something like that, and so obviously he had like some extra money lying around, and
Okay.
basically he said like, yeah, this game gave me so much, fun moments, like in the last, let's say, year or so, that he felt like obliged or happy to pay that amount of money. So yeah, again, psychology, it's very
Yeah.
very interesting, how these things work.
Mm. Plus, obviously, with that guy, banker as well, I'm assuming he has a bit of money. Obviously, it's a little bit different. Than to him, the 4 grand might be worth it, for that enjoyment, that he gets. I'm sure you've seen the articles where like a 10-year-old has spent $1,000
Yeah.
on their parents, card, buying, items in a game, but they're just like an average person with an average job. That's where it becomes problematic and very
Yep.
you know serious.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. For this reason, are you familiar with the gacha mechanic? Or I think more commonly, it's also known as loot boxes.
Loot boxes, yes, I've heard of
Yeah.
that.
So basically, loot boxes. Well, gacha mechanic. It comes from Japan, and gachapons are those machines that you put in a coin, and you twist this mechanism, and like a ball with a little toy comes out. That's what the
Okay.
gachapon is. And I'm sure you've seen it. Like, this mechanic is very is commonly used in mobile games, where you can buy these gachas or boxes or chests, and they're gonna have some randomized rewards, right? Some cards, and maybe one is guaranteed to be of a certain quality, etc., etc. Now there is a lot of legislation being discussed, and this has been discussed forever on the European Union level, whether gachas should not be banned because there is a tendency to invoke and promote gambling behavior.
Mm.
And fun fact, certain a very specific type of gacha. So we're talking a gacha is just a chest, right, or treasure chest or loot box, if you will. Has been banned in Japan, and the reason for that. Hold on, let me look up what the name was. It was. Give me a second. Yeah, kompu gacha. So that's a Japanese term, and basically how these gachas worked was, imagine you have an event, right? And you can obtain like time limited rewards in those gachas. And let's say if you obtain a full set, like I don't know, if you're talking about an RPG game, like you obtain the boots, the trousers, the armor, and the helmet, so you've completed your set, you're gonna get a legendary sword. There's no other way to obtain this legendary sword, right? But the only way to obtain these items are via gachas, and obviously the chances of you getting the entire set are super low.
Hmm.
So it's enforcing kind of this gambling behavior. And imagine, I'm pretty sure that there were some companies who abuse this, that maybe some of the stuff from the set are common. So you feel that you're making good progress, but the one item is going to be super duper rare. And so what's going to happen? People are going to start spending money and keep purchasing gachas until they get that one item because they're
Or in the hope of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because they just needed one item to obtain the
Yeah.
legendary sword. So actually, Japan has banned those type of gachas already. That was a long time
Okay.
ago. So there's
I
a
mean,
lot of discussions about the let's say ethics of loot boxes.
oh yes, I've heard, and been following the discussions about loot boxes and all the, the controversy, over the years of loot boxes, and I think it's just like an extension of, like pay to, play, all those sort of things that you're spending real world money to, for digital items, and sometimes what's crazy is that people will say, oh, 60 $70 or 60 £70 or euros is a lot to buy like a PlayStation game,
Yeah.
but then they'll spend significantly more than that on a mobile game that, like, like the coins, for example, get used up and effectively amounts to nothing in the game. But because they're doing it in small chunks, maybe over a slightly longer period of time, instead of spending £60 now, they might be doing it over a 2 month period.
Hmm.
But they'll do that, and when I've spoken to people about it, they like you were saying with the banker guy, they kind of try to justify it, or so sometimes they're shocked. They're like, oh yeah, I could have just got a regular game, a
Yeah.
single player game.
Yep. Yep. Totally. I mean, if we're talking about the ethics of spending money in a game, the way I see it is that if you have a game that you're playing for a long time, you meet with your friends online, you have a clan, and it's essentially providing you with a lot of fun time. Then if you make a certain purchase every now and then, to me, it actually makes sense because the best way to think of free to play games is not necessarily as products, but as a service, right? Games as a service, that's how it's called, right? And those players are essentially just boosting their experience, right? It's a free game, so you get a taste of it, and you can make the decision if you want to boost the free experience to a higher level. Now, if that means that you're making a purchase every month, every week, or whatever the case might be, to me that's okay because you're paying for a service. But then there is the other extreme where you have ludopathies, people with gambling addiction. Now that's a problem. Yeah, that's a problem that I think is not being addressed yet because those people just lack the control to make like a meaningful, or let's say a decision that this is not something they want. They don't want the in-game items. They just can't resist to get that rush, that adrenaline rush of buying a loot box and trying their chance of obtaining
Hmm.
something super rare.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And like you were saying, that there really isn't regulation or attempt at even looking at that side of things, because when you walk into a casino, for example. Again, I don't go to casinos, so I don't know really how they operate on the door, but I I'm guessing maybe some casinos, when they see somebody that's looking a bit too, crazy looking, in terms of a bit too addicted, they might be like, nah, let's just, maybe it's not worth the hassle of having this person there, the issues that, it might, create. Let's just have the ones that are maybe like semi in control, at least, of their, senses, in terms of gambling. Like, they can at least make that decision. Whereas with a game, anyone can go and buy a video game as long as you've got the money. They put the disc in or they download it or whatever it is, and then they can start, add their card and they can just start purchasing. There's no checks or anything to, see, is this person, actually addicted or already was and has a tendency to, do things like this that's destructive to their life and maybe
Yeah,
the people around them.
yeah. I mean, these are really meaningful ethical considerations. I mean, I think this needs to be discussed because, if we go back to your example of a casino, I can't imagine anyone in the casino throwing that obviously addicted person out, right? That's what a casino is. There, you're gonna lose money there, right? Um, I don't see the casino throwing the gambler out. Now, when it comes to a mobile game, now how would you approach this? This is something that really needs to be discussed because I mean, there's already, just to be clear, there's already certain regulations that protects minors, and that's, I think, completely meaningful,
Yeah.
right? But how do you identify a person who is addicted as opposed to a person who just has a buttload of money and likes to spend his money in the game?
Yeah.
And then the question is, should you prevent the gambler from, spending his money if he wants to, you know, support this habit that he has? Like, is it morally right for you as the game developer to sort of make a moral judgment on this type of behavior and prevent it? Now, just to be clear, I'm not saying yes or no. I think this is a serious ethical consideration that should be discussed.
Yeah, 100%. Plus, also, I think like the way I see it is, if you're willing to intervene in the real world with somebody and, let's say, put them into rehab or try and help them or control their addictive, nature, then I think it stands to reason that potentially, there's some sort of things that should or could be done in the digital world. But again, it's like, how do you go about it? How do you distinguish, like you said, somebody that has a bit of extra money, even if they're not rich, but if they've got a bit of extra money after they've, bought the grocery, they've paid the bills, done the things they need to do, like versus somebody going to the cinema because they've got some money left over, or
Hmm.
buying some clothes. Somebody might say, you know what, to me, sitting on my phone on Clash of Clans or Candy Crush and buying, the gems, or whatever the,
Hmm.
the mode of, trade is worth it to me, and they might be okay with that. But then again, like, how do you prevent, or try and prevent, a 30-year-old that clearly has some sort of, addictive personality, from being destructive to their life and potentially the life of others as well? Because it's definitely a very difficult thing of trying to, track it, like, if, figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think, I mean, I'm sure there's ways it could be done.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna make a hypothetical scenario, but maybe if your the psychiatrist, right, or psychologist or whichever doctor confirms that you do have a gambling addiction
Hmm.
disorder. I believe it's a disorder. Um, then, for example, the bank. I'm making it up, right? I'm not saying this is how it should be, but I'm saying there could be a solution. The question is an ethical one, though. The bank, if you prove this certificate that yeah he's unfortunately a licensed gambler, let's say, the bank could make a certain restriction on how much that, or maybe a family member can agree with the bank how much that person can spend weekly, monthly, whatever. There could be a little budget for virtual products, right? You cannot, that person could not go over that budget. Now the question is again an ethical one to me. Should we be managing the behavior in this manner, right? At which point we as society are going to jump in and are going to say, okay, this is a serious disorder and he needs our help, as
Hmm.
opposed to he's an adult, right? He should be able to make these decisions for himself. There's a very thin line. Again, I think this is a very complex topic especially when it comes to mobile games, because um, people spend. There are some people who spend insane amount of money. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands, easy, easy. When you see the numbers, you just don't want to believe them. But there's people who have been doing it for years and they find the value in it, and they don't have a gambling addiction. They're just super rich, and they're paying for. They like to spend money in their favorite game. So I think we're gonna have to wait a little bit and have a little bit more discussions, and probably some other experts are gonna have to jump in until we as a society make a call on how or what's the morally right thing to do for these type of people that actually do have a gambling addiction, and how can we help them gain control over their gambling habits. Now, is it by restricting? Is it games having certain mandatory features? That would help these type of people. I think that's something that's probably going to come in the future for sure.
Oh yeah, like it's definitely interesting, like how this could be done, and like you're saying, should it be done? Because if we're considering them adults, should they be able to spend their own money? But again, like it to me comes back to that thing: if we're willing to say that somebody that has, let's say, a drug addiction, a physical drug addiction that is buying drugs in the real world, if we're willing to intervene with that, and then if we're willing to intervene with somebody that goes to the casino all the time to gamble, like
Hmm.
potentially we could just from a moral standpoint say we need to intervene with from the video game perspective, or whatever it might be. But I think you touched on another interesting point, is that if they're adults, but again, what are we considering an adult? Because we have ages, obviously,
Hmm.
like in the UK 18 is an adult,
Yeah.
but I've met like 30-year-olds that are just immature,
Yeah.
like they just are not, like, in reality, adults. But then I met like an 18-year-old that they're wise beyond their years. Like they are, like, if you put them in a scenario that a typical 18-year-old would be put in, they would cope with it a lot more. And I think that's a real big issue, nothing to do with the gaming industry, but just an issue within societies, that we have these things. Okay, 18's adult, anything below it is a kid, and anything below like a certain bracket is like not a super kid, but like it's like a really young child. But again, you get people that might be 15 and they've gone through a lot and they're just
Mhm.
very mature, for example. And like
Yeah.
like how do we like potentially distinguish between that possibly?
Well, I don't. I understand what you're saying, but I don't think there is like a solution, because then basically we would need an individual approach to every single person, right? I mean, you may be mature in one area and make really bad decisions in another area, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody has that, right?
Oh, 100%.
We are all certain types of personalities, and that's why the age of 18 has been established in most countries that I'm aware of, except I know in the US you can drink from 21. But
Is it
usually,
to 21 in the US? Okay.
yeah, yeah. How is it in the UK?
As far as I want to say 18. I want to say 18.
Yeah, it's 18 here as well. But anyway, the reason why the age of 18 is established in most countries as the age from when you're adult is because, based on experience and decades and hundreds of years of experience, that's the assumed age when you should have the basic life experience and be be able to make meaningful adult decisions and also bear the consequences. Now, for sure, for some people it's gonna be earlier, for some people it's gonna be later, and like we said, it probably it's gonna be probably varied across various areas of life, right? But you need to make a certain benchmark for it, and on like if we took the aggregated data, 18 would be the age. Like this has been developed based on like the culture's experience, right? So but yeah, definitely, again, I mean, to me it all comes down to how much of a personalized experience and help should not only game developers but even, even other type of developers, because we could be talking about apps have for these type of people. This is a very, very interesting area, honestly. Like, now that we are talking about it, you and I mean, I never thought about it to this depth, but having this discussion, um from the top of my mind, based on what we said, I think for sure this is a gray area that the first company who is going to tackle this is probably going to be in the news, right? Because
Yes, and a lot of people will probably
there's
hate
def-
them for it
yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
for sure. Again, I think this is a wonderful ethical question, but there's this thing called corporate responsibility, right? And this could be one way of gaining some social credit, or like you say, making some people angry.
You're
So,
potentially losing it because if
oh,
let's
potentially
say
losing, absolutely. But I mean, again, it's how much, like, because it might feel unfair, and I completely get it. Like, why does a company feel that they need to tell me how I should behave when I am legally considered an adult, right?
yes,
Their idea of a problem or what might constitute a gambling addiction might not be my point of view. So, oh,
yes.
definitely a gray zone.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's definitely an interesting one, especially if let's say a big company tries to do good and they say that we'll require all of our, let's say, 10 million monthly active users or gamers to go through some sort of verification process. But potentially just for the 100 of those 10,000 that might have an issue, like the other 9,900 will be thinking, or some of them will, that nothing wrong with me. Like I spend literally £4 a month. Like I'll buy one set of gems, and that's it. I'll leave it at that,
Hmm.
and then I won't buy nothing for another month. Or I just don't spend money at all in the game. Or I've got loads of money and it's not that big of a deal for me. Or I don't buy PlayStation games anymore, but I spend roughly the same amount per month on mobile games, so it basically balances out. Like I can definitely see them saying, why am I getting punished for it?
Right.
And that could definitely have a big backlash on the first company, or the first set of companies that decide to do that. And that could really hurt, their game offering as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's the same case that you mentioned with the casino, right? Like, my reply was, why would they throw a gambler out? They want the gambler in,
Mm.
right? So again, I think it comes down to the question of corporate responsibility. I honestly, to be honest with you, I don't think this is coming anytime soon. I think it's, if we are talking about it, then there's definitely other people talking about
Oh,
it.
yeah, 100%.
There's definitely eventually going to be a company that's going to tackle this issue. I'm very much looking forward to what the results will be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the question is, are they going to tackle it because they believe it's an issue that needs to be tackled, or are they going to tackle it because some event occurs? Because sometimes companies are, like they're happy to leave things going as they are, making the money they're making,
Hmm.
and until something major happens, let's say if it's something safety related, they're happy, nobody's getting hurt, but then somebody gets hurt, then all of a sudden they're all over this issue that they may have been aware of to some extent.
Right.
So that will be interesting. Like, what will be the trigger point? Will it be a company that's saying, okay, we want to do good? Will it be some event that occurs, or will it be government regulation? Like, what will be that trigger point?
Hmm. Well, if you ask me, my bet would be on government regulation, because company, by definition, is looking to make a profit, right?
Hmm.
So that's why I find this concept of corporate responsibility intriguing, Usually, from okay, this is my point of view. I'm not looking to point the finger or anything, but I believe personally that a lot of companies who do indeed comes with really interesting, projects, so like pro bono services, etc., etc. They usually are looking for to get something back in return, whether that be like social credit, or be covered in a newspaper or anything like that. I honestly wonder, and I'm sure there are companies like that who do a lot of these, let's say, projects or things that would fall under the umbrella of corporate responsibility with like true intention of, let's say, making the world a better place.
Hmm.
I honestly wonder. I know there is some, you know I wonder to what extent, or how many of the big companies, the really big ones, the big software companies, have honest intentions of, making the world a better place. I think this is a different topic, and I think it's, again, and I think this might be for another episode of a podcast, because it's a very, very complex area.
Yeah, I mean, like it's a difficult one because I know myself I've had this opinion before, and my opinion slightly changed over the years. But I know other people will as well, saying that, oh, they should just do the right thing. And obviously, one person's right thing is not another person. But let's say if we could generally agree on what the right thing is, if let's say a company gets to a size of 10,000 people, but if doing the right thing ends up hurting their business potentially, and they lose 5,000 of those people that they've employed, like, are they at that point, obliged to do, like, I'm sure
Yeah,
you've heard of that saying, I'm trying to think what the saying is, the one that you do the action that produces the most amount of good and the least amount of damage. But obviously, if there's two actions, and let's say one will produce more damage and the other will produce a little less, and that will produce more good, the ends justify the means, almost,
yeah.
kind of things. Like, are they at a point to be obliged of, okay, 5,000 of your employees will have to be laid off potentially as a result, but
That's it.
10,
Right.
like 15,000 will be better off
Hmm.
as a result of these, decisions? Are
Right.
you obliged to take the 15,000 decision? And even then, how better off is that 15,000 going to be compared to laying off 5,000 people? And then do you extend it onto the families of those 5,000 people that may have done nothing wrong as well?
Exactly. You nailed it. I was actually just reading about a company, where basically they started a program where they wanted to lead their employees to community involvement and volunteer, and they wanted to get their employees to do 4 hours of community work per month, right? And this is exactly what I was thinking. Like, okay, I think it's a wonderful initiative, and if I'm pretty sure that the employees were more than excited to get 4 hours off of work, right, and go paint some wall, or whatever the case might be. But then I was thinking, but what's the right thing? Because imagine you're the project manager, and project managers are, for the most part, always stressed because they're always making sure that the team is hitting the deadlines. And now you're, for lack of better term, losing 4 hours per each of your member per month. Now, obviously, you can account for that if you're a good project manager and you're planning, right? But imagine that the company implements this policy, right? And how do you, as the PM, the project manager, feel, right? What's the right thing? Of course, as a project manager, as a person, you see the good in volunteering. But on the other hand, it's making your job of making sure the project is making its deadlines much more difficult. And like you said, that might influence salaries, the project success, the target goals not being met, etc., etc. So this is exactly the fundamental problem that comes with the corporate responsibility. Like, what is the actual right good thing? Because of course, volunteering and community work is good, but also making sure that you're profitable and being able to pay people salaries, etc., etc., is very important. Because if you cannot do that, then you cannot do volunteer work, right? If you don't have money, then you need to start laying people off, and there is not going to be anyone to do it.
Yeah, well, I mean that's 100%. It's like I'm a big fan of government-backed social programs, but the problem is they require money, and they require people that require to be paid. Even if you could get away with paying them less, you still need some form of payment. You need money. You need resources. So like you need a bit of both. You need a bit of, let's say if we're saying the left is more of the social side of it, and then the right is more of the capitalist side of it, making the
Hmm.
money. The reality is, one it, without the other long term does not do well, because if you have the left side where you're doing all these social programs, it gets to a point where you've got no money. Let's say your intentions are good, you're a good person run by good people, but if you've got no money to run those programs, it does no good. But then if you're completely focused on just making money, but again, let's just say you are a good person, or your government, your organization is a good organization, what's the money for? Like if you're just constantly making money, but you're not reinvesting it, again, if it's in a company for the employees, for
Hmm.
their customers, or whether it's in a country, for their the citizens, then like what is the point of it? So you got to have a bit of both, and unfortunately a lot of people want to go into one camp instead of saying, what, we need a bit of both. The people get too tribal and say, I'm one way or another.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, wow, this is. Have you ever had such a philosophical episode? This is
I
really,
mean, I've
really.
had a couple. I
This
mean,
is.
a lot of my conversations in the real world with the right person do go very philosophical, and I'm always open for that sort of
Yeah,
discussion.
absolutely. I mean, this is definitely meaningful questions. My point of view, and that's my experience as well, is that um, it's all of these concepts and ideas are great until you start working maybe with the P&L sheets,
Yes.
and then then the reality when you see it, and it's very clear whether the numbers are red or the numbers are green or whatnot, that tends to put the this issue a little bit more into context. Like, again, I don't think anyone would argue with doing social work or volunteering work, but at the same time companies need to work, and uh, and basically you need to be generating profit to be able to pay people and to be able to keep running your company, etc., etc. So, and I think as a PM or project manager or whoever works with a certain budget, you know, is gonna have to plant his feet firmly on the ground and be a little bit realistic. Because, and then you nailed it again. Like, you're gonna have to get the best of both worlds. Like, probably just like in most things in life, the best decision is gonna be somewhere right in the middle, right? Like, you need to be
Mm.
realistic, but also we should be a little bit on the ethical side. And if we have a big successful company and we can afford it, then we should probably act responsibly,
Oh
and
yeah.
utilize our know-how, our people, to make our community a little bit of a better place.
Yeah, and I think like the other interesting side of it is it also depends on how well the company's doing in any given period. Like a company might have a great year, they've got a lot of excess capital, and they're like, what, we can improve the lives of our employees, but we can also do a lot of social good as well, in our country, in the industry, however it might be. But then what happens if they start social programs, they're on a one-off, they're a bit more recurring or long term, they might take 10, 15, 20 years, and
Hmm.
then they have a bad year in the company or a worse year, and they're at a point where they're saying, okay, all the stuff that we did internally plus all the social programs that we've started, we cannot maintain them all, something has to give.
Hmm.
And like the backlash they would get if they're, let's say, funding meals in Africa for 10,000 people a year, if they say, what, this year we just can't do it, or for 2 years we're not going to give any meals, nobody's going to the average person at home isn't going to say, I understand that big company,
Hmm.
did really good for, those people in Africa or whatever the social program is, but they're struggling a bit this year.
Hmm.
So, they can wait for giving some meals. Like nobody's going to understand
Nope.
that.
No, you're totally right, and I think the company who gets into this position better have an outstanding PR department because yeah, nobody
Yes.
likes whenever social topics are concerned, it's a very sensitive topic, and especially when it also entails like big companies, right? Because how does a regular person see a big company, right? They're greedy, they are abusing people. I mean, that could be a stereotype, right? But you see where I'm coming from, right? And if you see if you need to share this type of bad news, like okay, this year we're not doing so great, so we need to put a halt on our social programs, yeah, you're probably gonna taint your reputation a little bit. This is exactly one of those cases that, well, first of all, I would not want to be in that position,
Mm.
and you better have a really really good storytelling skills, because here you're gonna have to do a really good job explaining the context in very understandable terms. Even that's not guaranteed to give you success, right? But that's, at least that's how I would approach it. Like explain everything like a story. Like, this was our intention, this is why we thought we could do it, this is what happened, we were not expecting this. In order for us to be able to support such projects in the future, we really need to ramp up this year, and for this reason we need to put a halt on it. This is our forecasted results, and we hope that we'll be able to continue in this manner.
Oh yeah, and if you just look at it on a personal level, I'm sure you've had this scenario. Either you've done it, or it's been done to you, or probably both. You've made a promise to someone with the best of intentions, and then something comes up legitimately, and you have to cancel or go back on that promise. Like, how difficult is it just with two people?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, and that's just two people. And a lot of the time, it's over something that does not really matter. Like in 6 months, you're not going to care, or you shouldn't care about it. But imagine if it's something where people's lives are at stake, and
Yeah.
there's tens of thousands or potentially millions of people. And plus, there's also another interesting side of it. Imagine if a big company does these social programs, they decide, okay, you know what? It's going to cost us a bit more than expected to run the social program. We've been a good company in terms of, let's say they're a mobile company and they make mobile games and they have in-app purchases. Let's say they've been, socially and morally good with the way they do their games. They've stayed off loot boxes and those sort of stuff. But then they're like, you know what? We want to still be able to pay employees. We still want to do this social program that's going to cost more than we expected.
Hmm.
Should we do the things that we thought immoral
Hmm.
in our games to fund it? And like, that's another like crazy and interesting scenario as well. And at that point, is it even worth it if they're gonna become almost evil themselves? For example.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's wow, we're touching upon some really difficult topics today. So I don't know.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Sorry, I lost a little bit of train of thought there.
No,
Please,
no,
please
no
cut it out.
problem. Yeah. So, like, on on a lighter note, uh, when you was in Spain, how did you find that transition from living in Slovakia to being in Spain? Did you learn the language? Did you know it beforehand? Like, how was that cultural difference?
Well, I was already accustomed to traveling because as a kid I used to live in the US for 2 years. Then I did my
Hmm.
master's in the Netherlands. So I was already accustomed to a certain level of living abroad. Now, the move to Spain, I started learning Spanish before moving there. However, I can't say that I learned it on spot as quickly as I thought I would, because obviously I worked in English. I always worked in international environments, and that really makes the learning the language difficult, because then you're exposed to it outside of work, right? So how? But overall, I really like Spain. I mean, I don't think there's many people who would disagree, but first and foremost, Spain is big, so you got different regions with different cultures. But I can say that my experience has been overly positive for the most part, and I met some wonderful people that I'm still in touch with, and we're visiting each other every now and then. Sometimes they visit me, other times I visit them. So actually, I found the Spanish culture very easygoing, very welcoming, and yeah, I think that aided in the transition being very smooth. again, I don't think, like, I'm talking about like when you move for an indefinite amount of time, right? You don't know if you'll be working 3, 5, 10, 20 years, right?
Mm,
But it's different if you're just visiting a country as a tourist and when you're
yeah.
actually living there. And I know that I have known some people that have had some big, well, not big, but issues with it. And obviously, I mean, I, you know, didn't have a family, but there's people who do, and I can imagine how that complicates things.
Oh yeah, especially once
So
you have schools involved and yeah.
it's exactly the same situation like we discussed with remote work. You know, some people are just naturally fitted for remote work. They can adapt.
Hmm.
They can even see it as a positive experience. It maybe it aids their work, you know. And I think it's the same with moving abroad. You know, you've got some people who are open to, you know, learning new language, meeting different culture. They're super adaptable, and I can imagine that there's people who this is not the type of experience that they're looking for, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, they're just better suited in staying in an environment that's more familiar to them.
So in terms of gaming, what games are you currently playing?
Well, I am playing a lot of Diablo 4.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that came out recently. How is it?
um wow, please don't get me started. I mean, there is a lot of good, and there is a lot of areas to improve. I don't know if you've been following like the gaming news lately, but they released a very unpopular update, and basically the community backlash was so strong that within the next day the devs said, okay, we are reverting on most of the changes and we've heard you and we'll never do this again. They pretty much nerfed most of the classes in the game without any sort of upfront information, so people could not prepare. And it was just in time when the first season of Diablo started. So the game has seasons, and people got very upset. And in my opinion, you know, there is this thing that starts happening when you start working in games, that you start to see what, you know, some designs or systems are meant to do. And also, if you worked in software development, you understand that the team knows that certain features should be implemented, but the timeline just doesn't allow it.
Hmm.
And so you kind of see that, and I see it. But I think there is still a lot of lacking. But still, for like a busy person, if you know, me and my brother is 43. He's a full time attorney. We play at night, you know, after our duties are, you know, and obligations are finished. And it's a game that, you know, adheres to both casual players like myself or super hardcore players who are playing all day. So I think with hopefully a couple updates, it's gonna be, it has the potential to be a wonderful game. It's not there yet, but it has the potential.
That's good to hear. Yeah, I mean, I have been thinking about getting it. The biggest thing that stops me right now, I'm just so, I'm just busy with other games. There's so many other games like Jedi Survivor, Horizon, Dead Space,
Oh
and a
wow,
few other games I can't even remember right now that I'm in the middle of that I need to get back to. 2 or 3 VR games as well that that I do really want to
yeah,
finish and play that I have been enjoying. So there's just so many, and obviously it helps that because I'm busy with them. By the time I probably get around to it, hopefully these issues will be ironed out. The game will be cheaper as
yeah,
well, so like it has that advantage of it. Like there's that one advantage of being getting older, having a family, having a career, being busy with life. That because especially nowadays games come out and they're buggy, but then they get fixed 6 to 12 months
hmm,
later. And by the time you get around to play it, sometimes it's just so much better. I remember like the new Horizon, I bought it on day one. I started playing it. I played it for a few hours. There were some bugs and some problems. And then when I stopped playing it, I went back to it several months after, and I remember, and he had all the updates. And I remember playing. I was like, "This is better." Like, it
yeah,
just felt, it just felt better. I could notice that. Obviously, in that scenario, I had it on day one. I stopped playing. I got busy with other things, but then I noticed that it was actually, improved. So there is that, advantage to it. I'm thinking about Diablo maybe on either PlayStation or I have to see how well it runs on Steam Deck because I have been enjoying playing games on my Steam Deck as well.
I can imagine this being a super fun experience on the Steam Deck.
Oh
Wow, you
yeah.
know, handheld. Yeah, but I mean, it can be a time-consuming game. Like
Yes.
to be honest, I play very few console games nowadays. Like, and I think this is we already touched upon this, but mobile games have, you know, evolved immensely in the last 10 years, and you're getting close to triple A experience. Now I'm not talking about Diablo Immortal, because yeah, I don't know if you caught the controversy regarding the announcement of the mobile version of Diablo a couple of years ago. But there's games that are almost replicating a triple A experience. Um, One of them being for example, Honkai Star Rail. Like, that game is, it looks good, it plays good, and you don't need to have like super long sessions like usually you would on a console. And this is actually, I think this is actually a fault, but I got used to having like lower attention span, and if I just want a little bit of distraction after a long day, there was like many years when my go-to distraction would be mobile games. I would not touch console because, let's say, you have 40 minutes before you go to bed or something. You're a console player, right? You know that you're not probably gonna do a lot in 40 minutes on a console, right?
No, no. Especially if the game's not in suspended mode and then turning it on, changing the input, getting into the game, loading the game, blah, 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 blah. And then you turn it on and it turns out the way you was, you're 10 minutes back in the game because of the checkpoint. And then you're just
Yeah,
like, oh,
yeah, like Elden Ring or Souls games. I don't know if you play those, but
I played the Souls games, yes.
I'm a big fan. Oh, that, in my opinion, the Elden Ring is one of the best games ever. Oof. It was such a pain, playing it on like with like on like a 1 hour session a day at best. I was really looking forward to like holidays and vacations so that I could actually finish the game properly, because that game is immense and it's so punishing. Like, the skill curve and all that. Oof, yeah, not a casual game by any means.
No, no, definitely not. The Dark Souls or the OG one, Demon Souls as well.
Oh,
It's
wonderful.
definitely a punishing game and a game that you need to spend time in. And I mean that's the one of the issues when you do get older, you do have other responsibilities. It's the reason that I've actually stopped quite a few years ago now, stop playing multiplayer games like Call of Duty on a regular basis.
Hmm.
Is that you've got to play it on a regular basis because even if you're a good gamer, you just get annihilated. Like you just cannot compete if you are not regularly playing it. And obviously nowadays where the game you're unlocking stuff that improves your character, whether it's armor, whether it's gun, whether it's abilities, like, it's you really do need to just keep on top of it. And when I was at uni and college, especially at college, I would just play it all day. Like outside of doing the work at school or at college, I would just play games and I would get to like in Killzone, I was in the top, I think like 0.01% in the world or something like that. I was just,
Wow.
annihilating it. But when you get older and you can only spend, maybe an hour every week or so, or every now and again,
Yeah.
you play it, and most of the time you're just getting killed, and you're just like, I'm not enjoying it. Like, I want to sit here and enjoy games. Like, I don't want to sit here and feel like I'm in pain
Yeah.
here and just get
Absolutely.
annoyed. So, like, that's the reason I've always loved single player, but that's the reason my go-to now is single player. If I'm on my own, like if I have a friend with me, then I might crack on Call of Duty split screen.
Hmm.
It's one of the few games still around that you can do split screen. But I'll crack that up, and that can be fun. Doing that.
Yeah, but it's funny that you mentioned Call of Duty, because I have the exact same issue as you, and I'm sure a lot of the working people that they have problem finding free time to game. But actually, the last Call of Duty, now I don't know if they have changed that since, because I played maybe like I don't know, a year ago, but they actually had this adaptive matchmaking So you would, for the most part, be matched with people of similar skill to yours, which was the reason why I bought the game. I am a super casual player. I really suck on at FPS games, but apparently Call of Duty had this adaptive system that like it would the matchmaking would be improving or going down depending if you're improving or getting worse. So you would always have the same, let's say, or similar experience, similar challenge. Then I just found the game boring, so I actually sold it second, to someone. But um, I think this is an interesting idea that they did this, because I think they're exactly targeting people like you and me. You know, I don't want to be annihilated. I want to play games to relax. Like,
Yeah, but you want a bit of a challenge as well. Like
exactly. And I
you don't want it to feel like you're on very easy mode either. You want that bit of a challenge, and like maybe dying now and again, and you need to adapt, but not so much that you're just getting killed by some 8-year old kid that's swearing at you, and he's got a squeaky voice,
yeah. Oh man.
especially on Xbox.
Oh man. I love these videos of of kids squealing into the mic. I was never a Call of Duty player, by the way. I was always more on the Battlefield side.
Fair enough. Yeah, I was always more Call of Duty. I mean, I used to love Battlefield pre Battlefield 3, so in the olden days,
Yep.
Battlefield 1, 2, 2142, 1942 as well. Like, I'd like those old school ones.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
love those ones.
I always found Call of Duty to be. I mean, Battlefield was always marketed as being, let's say, more realistic. Call of Duty was
Yeah, a bit
more.
more simulatory, almost.
Exactly, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
It felt
I
heavy.
think
It felt like
I
you had weight to you, whereas Call of Duty was very floaty.
it was indeed, and I think it also. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I found that Call of Duty always had this stigma, but it was definitely a stereotypes of it being indeed played by more, let's say, kids. You know,
Yeah,
no,
I mean, I don't know how true that is, but I
I don't
agree. Like,
either.
I've always had the perception of it's a bit more of a game for kids,
Hmm.
whereas the people that I know that play Battlefield are all adults.
Hmm.
Whereas for Call of Duty, I know anyone from being an adult to like a child, like a variety of ages. Whereas the ones that are adult and they don't have as much time potentially, they do I find gravitate towards Battlefield, especially if they're not playing games that much. I
Yeah,
have noticed that.
and now there's this. There's a different games. Have you heard of Hell Let Loose?
I've heard of it. I have not played it.
I gave it a try. I really like history. I'm a history aficionado, and apparently this game is, well, realistic as much as a game can be, but it's the strategic element of that game is insane, because you've got like various ranks and positions like you would in an army or in World War II, and you've got like commanders and people whose pure role in that game is strategizing. So you're like literally the whole team has to be on mics. Of course, not everybody is, but the game is built around communication. And you've got position, you've got riflemen, you've got tank, you've got engineers, people in the front lines, but then you've got people who are in the rear, just working with maps, and the squads are giving them requests like, hey, we need extra ammunition here, we need resources here, and the commander is, well, sending resources and doing whatnot on the map, but also issuing orders, and he's the one strategizing, giving orders to the various squads. And this game was, I mean, I played a little bit because it I must confess very humbly, it was too hardcore for me. So, yeah, I suck, I'm a noob. um but I found this so awesome because there was some elderly gentlemen playing, and apparently they were veterans from, I think, the Vietnam War, and they
Okay.
were just into military, and they really enjoyed this kind of immersive experience, of being able to strategize and coordinate with other people. So, us talking about Call of Duty and Battlefield, now I think that this game is on the more extreme side of realism and let's say tactical simulation.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna So I've heard of the game, never played it. I'm just making a note of it because I never really looked into it too much. It just the little bits I'd seen from it didn't make me think, I want to choose this over Call of Duty. But now that you're explaining, I'm like, it might be worth a try potentially.
Uh,
Just to see, what it's like possibly.
I feel the same. I mean, I'll be honest with you. If there's any Hell Let Loose players listening, they have to be laughing at me because to me the experience was punishing. I mean, it is a difficult game. And I was just getting shot left and right, and I didn't know where it was coming from. I didn't know what I was doing wrong. Then I wanted to try the commander position, so I was in the rear, and people had to be telling me like, "Hey, you need to place R2, and this is where you need to send the bombardments. Don't send it there. The person who requested it doesn't know what he's doing." So I was the person apparently in charge, being schooled by like lower ranks. So yeah, you kind of, but like even if you go on like Facebook or various communities they have, you'll see that these players are super dedicated and they're discussing strategies. And for what I've seen, the community seems to be pretty solid.
I mean, it has
Give
to
it a
be for
try.
a game like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think
I'll,
so.
I'll
I think
definitely
so.
check it out. So, I mean, that's all of the general. I mean, we've gone off a bit on a tangent, but like the questions around, what you do, your work experience, that sort of stuff that, I had. But I do always have a few rapid fire fun questions that I always ask. Are you ready for them?
Hit me. Let's do it.
Yeah. So, if you had to run a company, would you run a 10-person or a 1,000-person company?
Wow. A 10 person.
10-person. Okay.
I
And uh, I'll put this in euros. Actually, is Slovakia, do they use euros or do
Yep.
they have their own?
No, no, we have euros.
You have euros. Okay. So would you rather have 5 million upfront right now or 500,000 a year for the rest of your life?
Oh, 500,000 for the rest of my life. Easily.
Okay. I mean, that is the most popular choice on the podcast.
It just makes sense. Mathematically, I'm assuming I will not die within the next, 2 years.
Yeah,
So
that would suck then.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, so yeah, half a million a year is still a good chunk of money to live extra comfortably, right?
Yes, and maybe do some investing if you want to, and fail with it a few times as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. A couple of failures will probably be okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, what's your favorite board game, video game, and movie? And in terms of video game, because obviously you're heavy on like mobile as well, so that's split into two things:
Okay.
non-mobile and mobile.
Okay, okay. So board games, I think I'm gonna go with Game of Thrones, the board game. I just love the intrigue and politics that we call it the game that destroys friendships. Like you can backstab your friend after a 4 hour session and just ruin his game in one move. Great. Movie was next, right?
Yes, movie next.
Okay, so let me think. I'm gonna go with a Braveheart or Gladiator. I know Braveheart is completely historically inaccurate, but I just like it. I think it's a very archetypical movie. I really liked it. Gladiator, just I think a wonderful historical movie. And game. Okay, this is a tough one. So let's start with. Well, I already mentioned Elden Ring, and I'm just gonna say the whole Soulsborne series. For the narrative, I just find the way the narrative is presented genius. For people who haven't played, you're basically collecting items, and every item is a random part of the whole narrative, and it's up to the player to connect the dots. So every player kind of probably has his own version of the story if you get it in the first place, because it's usually quite complex. Mobile games, you know what? I'm gonna be super. I'm gonna be super cliche, and I'm gonna say Clash Royale because that's the first mobile game I got super addicted to. I don't know if you ever played it.
Which one?
Clash Royale. It's by
Clash.
Supercell.
Yes, from Supercell.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and it's the first game that I got super addicted to. Been playing it for years. Spent some money in it, some good money in it. I'm not gonna disclose how much, but I would be ashamed to. But
Uh,
again, this was one of the cases where I was totally okay with it. Totally,
Yeah,
like
that's
it.
fair
it,
enough.
it
If you're okay with it, that's not too bad. I actually had someone a few months back on the podcast who works at Supercell, and I'm pretty sure he worked on Clash Royale.
wow,
Yeah,
that's cool.
I'll send you the link to that one, so you might be interested.
Yeah, yeah.
If you like the Supercell games, I think you'll like that episode. So that was definitely a good one. To
Oh,
talking about your one of your favorite movies, Gladiator. What do you think of them doing a Gladiator 2 and then also Napoleon as well from Ridley Scott?
Oh wow! Well, first of all, Napoleon, looking forward to it so much.
It looks good.
Oh well, first of all,
It
one
looks
of my
fun.
it looks fun. First, I mean, it has the ingredients to be a good movie, right? Ridley Scott, one of my favorite
Mm,
directors of all time. Joaquin Phoenix, amazing actor. Great topic. I mean, Napoleon was such an interesting persona. He was such an amazing tactician. He declared himself Emperor of France. I mean, he
mm.
established an empire. Great, ambitious guy. So I hope they do a good job. And I read something about the Gladiator 2, and I think it's in the works. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I,
Yeah, I
I
mean, it's scheduled to come out at the end of next year, so it must definitely be underway. It's not something that they're just kind of discussing. It's well underway. They got a list
right.
of actors and actresses as
Right.
well.
Because I read something, and I think it may have been like a suggested article that I found under Napoleon. But Ridley Scott was giving an interview, and apparently they've been discussing, making Gladiator 2 for years, right? And apparently one of the versions they were working with is that Maximus, the main character of the original Gladiator movie, comes back from the grave, supernaturally, like he's resurrected. Obviously, that's not what they're going with, but it was one of
Hmm.
the variations. And I was just face palming, like, please don't do this.
Yeah, I hope
Please
they
don't
don't
do
do
this.
that.
Yeah, we don't want to go
Yeah.
into fantasy. Nah, just keep it historical as much as possible.
Yeah, because they've kept it grounded enough that you can call it a historical movie. But when they start doing stuff like that, they just like, please don't. Like, either don't do
Yeah,
a movie or talk about different characters.
yeah. I mean, I am pretty sure that's the direction they're gonna go with. Fairly sure.
Yeah, yeah, I highly doubt they'll do that. I mean, there might be some sort of flashbacks or dream sequences that are able to bring him back, but again, that's different to like you say, that sort of very fictional side of things.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I mean, I love the movie. I mean, the reason why I said Braveheart and Gladiator is because these are movies that I can watch 5 times a year easily, easily, and it's just I know every single line of the movie, and still I like to have it in the background. I think these are very what I mentioned archetypical stories. You've got your especially Braveheart is like it's so historically inaccurate, like I cannot even begin. But I just think the way the story is presented is just a very nice story. That's very cliche, but I think it's presented in a nice way. And Gladiator, I just like Roman history. I just read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. He's the emperor who is murdered by his son in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, so I mean, I've read that as well. I probably could do with another read of that book, to be fair.
Same,
But
same,
yeah,
same. But actually, I like the fact that I don't know if you noticed, but in the movie, when he's in his tent in Germania, he's actually writing the book. Well, I mean, you don't know that it's the book, but they kind of touch upon the subject that he's a
yeah.
philosopher. You know, great movie. And oh man, the battle scenes in the arena, oh, outstanding. And the soundtracks of both movies, wow, just you know,
Oh yeah, de- definitely a good movie. So, what video game are you looking forward to?
what video game am I looking forward to? This is a tough one. Final Fantasy just came out, and I'll answer like this: I'm looking forward to when the next Final Fantasy comes out, and it's a proper Japanese RPG like the old ones used to be. Have you played any of the Final Fantasy series?
I have. It's been a little while. I'm trying to think which one I played. It might have been the first, non-remake on PS3. I did think quite a lot of because I didn't get into it, to be honest, but I wanted to give it a chance, and I know they're not short games, so I spent a good amount of hours in it to give it a chance, and I just came away from it as they're not for me.
Right. Well, it's one of those games that I grew up with, you know, and back then it was like turn-based Japanese RPG, right? So you've got your characters and you're fighting enemies on a turn-based basis, and you're choosing attack, magic, item, whatever. And I don't understand why from like Final Fantasy 11 the games just took such a random direction, like even thematically, gameplay wise, it's as if every one of their games was an experiment. And I guess they have their reasons, who am I to tell them what to
Yeah.
do? But I guess this is just the nostalgic kid in me crying like I want what I remember the game being. So yeah, there is probably nothing more specific right now, besides me really looking forward to like a proper Final Fantasy coming out that's done in the old school JRPG style.
Hmm, fair enough. So yeah, in terms of me, the game that I'm looking forward to the most, it's a game that there's a good chance will never come out.
Yeah.
Half-Life 3 or a new Half-Life. Uh,
Did you play a lot of Half Life?
oh yeah, like it's one of those games I all play on a yearly, probably usually a yearly basis, and it if I can, spend a half an hour playing that, it's been a while since I played it. I know I always have fun,
Uh huh.
and like as a kid, I played it loads of time on like every difficulty setting, exploring it heavily. I have fond memories of getting like a new CPU, going from the
Yeah.
AMD X2 3800 plus to the 4200 plus that I bought on eBay just to get those few extra frames and then the new graphics card and the extra RAM and then trying it on my dad's laptop and then just trying to get it to work. And I had the steel box edition that you get a T-shirt with it, and when collected editions were like very good back in the day. I've still got that T-shirt because when we got it, that came out in '04. I was about 12, 13 then.
Hmm.
I was too small to wear the T-shirt because it was a large. My dad wore it, and then when I was old enough, for probably 16, 17, probably 17, 18, I took it,
Hmm.
and I've had it. I haven't worn it in probably a good few years, but I still got it in the wardrobe. So like, I do have a lot of fond memories of Half Life, and yeah, it's my Half Life 2 favorite game of all time.
Oh wow. I mean, I think you and I we have the same sentiment where we kind of remember the games that influenced us as kids, right? And you're
Mm,
looking for that kind of experience. Um, it's definitely an issue I have that I'm not as open minded as I used to be. Like back in the days, like any game you would buy, like you would play it 10 times, right? Like especially
yeah,
on
you would complete it, or
complete it, and
especially
yeah,
yeah,
eh,
especially when you didn't have, I don't know how your upbringing was, but obviously when you had to kind of justify the game
oh
purchase
yeah,
to your parents and you couldn't, like, now I've got money, I can just go and buy a game. And unfortunately I'm in a position where I can buy the game, not play it, and it's not that big of a deal. It's not the best thing to say, but it's the truth. But whereas back then, if I got a game, I even if it was, let's say, a 6.5 or 7 out of 10, it definitely still got completed.
oh
Like
my goodness.
there was not a choice there.
But this is like I've had games when we had the SNES, right?
Yeah,
We've had games that I was playing every year, like Donkey Kong and Super Mario World. Those were like I didn't even think about like, oh, I played this game like 100 times. You just wanted to be entertained. Like games are so much rarer and more valuable nowadays than nowadays, right? Nowadays, I think games are much more affordable. Plus, you got a whole lot of free games,
yeah.
and
There's
therein lies
that.
that like there. My problem is that I'm just not. Like I don't want to. I'm much less open to trying games. Like because I
Mm,
think it takes a lot more to get me interested, right? And that's why I only buy games that I know I'm gonna play for the AAA experience. Like Diablo, I mean, I knew I was gonna buy, right?
yeah.
I'm also a big fan of Paradox games. I don't know if you know Paradox. They make grand strategy games. Well, I know I'm gonna play that,
You
even
talking
if
about Paradox Interactive?
yeah, 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 absolutely.
Yeah, I actually had somebody, an audio programmer, on the podcast yesterday, and that episode's going live next week. So I'll send you that a
Oh
link as
my
well when that goes live.
goodness! Wow.
So
So
you're,
that's already two episodes
yeah,
that I need to catch up with.
he's working on the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre game.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
sounds cool. So yeah, but the point being is that I'm not as as open to trying new games as I used to. Exactly for this reason that I guess I'm just remembering, the nostalgic optimism of the early days when any game, even if it was utter crap, you would play it and you would be entertained.
Hmm.
Nowadays, the benchmark is so much higher. Like games are on a completely different level, and we as gamers are so much more spoiled. Isn't that true?
Oh yes.
Like, and
All the platforms available, all
oh
the
yeah,
price points available. You got PlayStation Plus, you got Xbox Game Pass. Like you could just have those two or one of them, and if you don't play games that much, you would just be entertained by that. Like just PlayStation Plus or especially Xbox Game Pass, where they're bringing in like Forza, Halo, Flight Simulator, Stalker, those sort of games day one.
right. And this brings a topic that I discussed with my colleague. He's like an old school veteran game designer, and he used to
Mm,
work on Pokemon Yellow for Game Boy.
okay.
And one topic that he and I discussed was how QA worked, because back then he was like the QA lead for localization. And nowadays, it happens. Something goes wrong, you release a game, it's bugged, there's a localization type or whatever. Well, what do? You release a hotfix and you fix it. Or even via some server side changes. Like sometimes you don't even need to release an update, right? You just fix it. But back then you didn't have that. Back then you were buying a physical product. Once it was shipped and there was no updates, right? Can you imagine the amount of QA that went into developing these games? You know, Once there was an issue and it was released, that issue was there forever because there was no way of
Was
fixing it.
yes.
Can you imagine the amount of QA? I mean, there had to be factories of QA making sure that everything is working as it's supposed to, checking every language that it's translated properly, that there's no typos, no errors. Just crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely insane when when you do think about it. But I feel like there probably was maybe more experimentation now because they know that they can remove the feature or fix it. Whereas then it was like, okay, we've got these 10 features. The four we definitely know are solid. The other two are all right. We could potentially include them, but the other four, no. And we've got no way of fixing it. So let's just remove them or wait till the next game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what the proper, let's call it, the product mindset is nowadays, right? I mean, you usually work with various hypotheses, and you try to validate those hypotheses as soon as possible, right? To assess whether developing such and such feature shows strong signs of potential or not, right? You don't want to overcommit. So this is definitely the modern way of working. Back then, you didn't have to. You didn't have that. You would have to do it the old school way of interviewing, players and using a lot of your gut instinct.
Oh yeah, 100%. So, final question, two-parter. Does money buy you happiness, and what does a good life mean to you?
Money is important, but it definitely doesn't buy happiness. I think you need money, but money itself does not equal happiness. I'm fairly sure of that. What's a good life? A good life is when you wake up happy, you go to bed happy, when you got good friends around you, and happy family, and you're all healthy. As long as you're healthy, everything else is secondary. So that's what good life means to me.
Okay, fair enough. And yeah, that's all the questions I've got. I want to thank you, Adam, for coming onto the podcast today for just his over 2 hours. It was a nice, good talk. It's very philosophical. We touched on a lot of different topics as well. I think this will definitely be one that the fans will enjoy. So yeah, again, thank you, Adam, for coming on, and I'll see everyone in the next episode of FireDEV.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.